I have a guest this morning that I am incredibly thrilled to bring you. I have known her literally forever. She is one of the many survivor families in our law enforcement circle here in the United States. And she's going to tell you her story, but she took that survivorship and is turning it into something absolutely amazing. And so I wanted you to hear about it directly from her. Shelley Klingerman, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So actually, we met because in addition to everything you do now, you're also an author. Talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I started working for a Fortune 500 company right out of college and quickly found myself traveling by myself. And throughout my career, I found myself in what I just referred to as cringy situations. And it was just mainly because no one had really talked to me about what I should do and things that I should look for and avoid. And as a result of that, I had to think on my feet, kind of sing and dance a little bit in some situations that I was in. And really, truly, they were avoidable had I just been talked to about it and discussed it. So after my 18-year career, I just reflected on a lot of those situations. And quite frankly, it was really personal to me then because I now had children. I have three kids, two girls and a boy, and they were getting ready to go out into the world. And I just took the opportunity to take all the things that I had experienced and learned how maybe I should have responded differently and avoided, quite frankly, and put it in a book. And I published that book in 19 and released it, and then just started getting requests to come in and train on the content. And it's really around situational awareness. And to be quite honest, it's probably more relevant now than it even was then, and it was important then. So that's what the book was about. And I think you and I really made first connection in it was back in probably 2006 when I did a project of passion around school security. And that's when my kids were younger. And I did a documentary around anti-terrorism. Again, looking forward, it's much more relevant today than it was then. But we've had many connections throughout both of our careers.
And this is the thing, you've always had this eye for crime prevention. You've always had an eye for security, and I always wonder if part of that isn't because you're part of a police family. Your brother Greg was a police officer, and you and your family and his family suffered through just the most horrible thing that a police family can be forced to deal with. Talk about Greg.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Greg and I were different personality wise, but we were cut from the same cloth. And I deeply respected and admired him. And again, if you met us, we were polar opposites. But man, was he good at what he did. And I truly respected his talent and his passion for the work he did. So he was a 30-year detective and FBI task force officer. And on July 7th of 21 was exiting his federal office building and was ambushed and murdered. It's as tragic and it feels random as it sounds. And that is what kind of put me on this mission to turn something that is impossible to get your head around. You find yourself in denial and disbelief, and it's something you can't control. So this foundation became somewhat of a grieving process for me. I grieve in a different way than maybe others. You know, some of my family had to go and just kind of get out of the public and, grieve in more isolation, if you will. But I wasn't able to do that because what I was finding was that I was so deeply sad, and then I would swing to just mad as hell, to be honest, about what happened. And those swings were big, and the anger emotion generates a lot of energy. And what I quickly realized is that energy, without intention of directing it somewhere, it can be productive or destructive. And without being intentional about putting it towards something productive, it would be destructive. And then that murderer would have taken more than one life that day, and that's just not going to be an option. So the whole point is to make something much bigger, positive, come from such an evil and senseless act.
And Greg's murder made national news. It happened, and I know you can't talk a whole lot about the case, but it happened in a smaller city in Indiana. And July of 2021 was right smack in the middle of, we were into that year-long, literally a war on cops, a national spike in violent crime. And here he was, and I know we still don't know if it was an intentional ambush of a police officer, was it random? But 3 years later, you're still waiting to find all of these things out. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand. When a police officer is murdered, everybody kind of reads about it in the paper, maybe sees, something on the local news, maybe the national news, and then everybody kind of gets back to their own lives. That's not true for your family, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents are in their 80s, and they truly are concerned about not seeing justice served. And it was just Greg and I. So it's a heavy day for them, day to day, with this being open and not having closure, or knowing that someone's going to have accountability for the actions. Because again, he was a great person and an amazing cop. And, we can't continue to stay silent when these things are happening, because, we're losing the good ones. And what does society look like? I think you had mentioned, I've always been kind of engaged in security, but it's only truly at the heart of it because I care. I mean, I care about this country. I care about law and order. I want my kids to grow up in a society that is, has respect and accountability. And, if I don't stand for this and don't speak up, then, I'm as much to be responsible. So it's just our way of, it checks a lot of boxes, but at the core, we will make sure that something much bigger, positive comes from such an evil and senseless act. We will write the ending.
And that's the thing. You're not somebody who, sits in the corner and sucks your thumb and weeps and things like that. You're a doer. So you decided to honor Greg, and all of law enforcement, frankly, in a pretty extraordinary way. Talk about Project Never Broken.
Yeah, so just another interesting fact about this whole community is that Greg was the third officer to be killed in the line of duty in 10 years. So for a community of our size, which we are around 60,000 and a force of around 130, that's a big blow. And I know what it's been like to experience one of those big T traumas. I can't imagine what these officers on that force and the families have been dealing with even prior to Greg. And now you just add this one on. So it gives them a way too. This organization gives them a way to feel like you're bringing purpose and you're have control of something, which is one of the hardest things. I mean, we cannot control the justice system, and our case has been delayed 5 times. It's unbelievably maddening. But what we can control is what we do. And so again, we keep doing things to make the loss and the outcome of the loss bigger than the loss itself. So we started Project Never Broken. Its mission is to boldly, and that's a very important word, boldly support law enforcement through hope, help, and healing while honoring the resiliency of humanity. And we spent the first probably 18 months just listening. Like, what do you need? This is not something that I had ever planned to do. It's not something, I'm not married into law enforcement. Yes, it's in my family, and my dad was fire and Vietnam, but it's not something that I had to deal with on a daily basis. Like, I'm very much learning is important in these relationships. The communication when you are married to a law enforcement officer or a first responder, the dynamic can be different because their days look very different than you and I's. They see things that most people will never see in a lifetime. They see multiple of those. So being there and able to support them is how we keep our front line healthy. And we need those guys on the front line and women, because nobody's really wanting to do the job anymore due to the narrative that it's been and the dangers and all the things that we know that police are kind of getting put in situations. So nobody wants to do it. When these things happen, like happened with Greg, make no mistake that the wives don't want them going to work the next day because, again, we don't know why. So when you don't know the why, it's very random, and that should be concerning to all of us. Their kids also see and hear this stuff, so their kids don't want them going to work. So what we are trying to do as an organization is bring programming to help support those front lines and the families that support them, because when these tragedies happen, it's not just to the individual, it's to the whole family. And I've had the fortunate and unfortunate opportunity to hear firsthand what it looks like. And to your point, to most people, it's a passing headline. To the families, it's life-changing, it's devastating, and it's way harder to process and work through than many probably realize.
Well, and Greg had coworkers too and that's something, because again, I started the police academy in January of 1981. There was no discussion of police officer mental health or how we talk to our families. Zero. We were just told, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it to your family. And whatever you see at work, get over it. And that has changed so much. And I know that one of the things that you've discovered is how just being in a law enforcement family affects kids and spouses and siblings and parents. I don't think,
yes.
There was nothing for my parents when I went to the police academy and then became a police officer. Talk about the family.
Yeah, I think, I've had interesting conversations with female officers. It can be lonely because when you really step back and look at it, just taking, for example, a female officer, we are kind of programmed as the moms. That's, the role we play. Female officers are also badasses, but, for their kids don't, that scares them. It scares them that their mom is going to go out and be in, maybe violent situations. Parents don't, when I hear about their little girl going and doing dangerous things. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. It's just been an interesting caveat that I had never thought about with female officers. When you go out with your girlfriends, like they want to talk about fashion and cocktails and shopping and, Hollywood. They don't want to talk about the things that, your day consists of. So I've come to understand they feel a little bit isolated. So, we as the foundation are taking some steps to see how do we get them into some programs or let them lead or find their peers to talk about those things because it's just important for them. But I think when you're asking about the family, I think that's what we also have to realize. We process our day and our bad days by talking about it. What you don't realize is that's not necessarily always an option for them because it scares their family. So that's what I've come to learn too, is, when officers go home, they work with the underbelly of society. They're not seeing people on their best day, they're seeing them on their worst. So when you are exposed to that constantly, what you want to do is go home and disconnect it from your own family. When you are in a relationship, you want to talk, and the natural things you talk about are your day. And when that's not something you want to talk about, but that's really all there is to talk about, sometimes that causes problems. And so we are also looking to bring in relationship programming, and we will eventually look at kids. We just haven't gotten there yet, but it's something that I get a lot of requests about. And I'm navigating this and putting on my entrepreneurial and innovation hat, and I'm trying things, and we will pivot and we take the responses back and try to make the next one better. But we're learning as we go. But again, at least it's in the direction of something positive coming of it, and we're not just sitting there waiting for a verdict, which we might or might not agree with. we are going to, again, make sure that Greg is remembered and all of these that have lost their lives by the positive that came from the loss, which in itself is so unnatural to say. But you can only do what you can do. And, I truly think that, God, somebody bigger has to play a part in this, because you don't have the emotional energy and capacity to do it without it, because it gets just so heavy and you want to check out, but you don't. I mean, there is something within that just keeps driving. And, I give that, grace to God. I don't know what else. There's just no way it would happen without a bigger something at play.
Well, and that's the thing, we all want our loved ones, especially a loved one like Greg, who was murdered, who had spent 30 years being this community hero. We don't want them to die in vain, and I think that's a real important part of Project Never Broken. Yes. is the like you said, the positive, even though that sounds so weird to say, the positive coming out of this, and also the memorializing of not just Greg but others.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we are doing for him what I know he would have done for others. I mean, he would have doggedly pursued justice, and he was just always in pursuit of what's right. And it was interesting when I say he was one of the good ones. He is such a leader. I in my other company, I teach leadership, but I have had so many people just share stories where he was just a natural leader. He was very humble. He didn't think less about himself. He just thought about himself less. And it was always, people described him as a chameleon. He was whoever he needed to be in that moment. So he was all about being the person he needed to be for whoever he was in front of. So he was really talented at going from having a conversation with an executive or someone in leadership to having a conversation with someone he was cuffing. And some of those people that he cuffed literally came to the visitation and said, I would not be here had it not been for him treating me with dignity and respect in a time that I did not deserve it. But he treated me that way, which is what I needed in that moment. And so, when I talk about someone that I admired, again, people who know us know that we are completely different, that I had a great admiration for him.
So you can't run a non-for-profit without events and fundraising. And this summer, you have a really terrific event coming up. Talk about Party with a Purpose.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing Party with a Purpose. And to your point, yes, it's a fundraiser, but it's also, again, everything we do is with great intention, and it's got his essence, and it's got a purpose. And so the purpose of this event is, yes, to raise some funds to help continue to bring in programs and speakers and underwrite officers who would like to attend conferences like the Wounded Blue that you're very involved in. But it's also to show a very intentional celebration of officers. So it's Party with a Purpose, a party for police. And we want all of our officers and first responders to know that sometimes maybe when you don't hear or see us, we are there. So this is an event. So those who want to show support can all come together, and we are going to celebrate police. We're going to celebrate the sacrifices they make. We're going to celebrate their families. So we're going to be selling tables. For instance, the table of 10, we're asking them to fill the table sponsors with 8 and then invite 2 officers so that they have an opportunity to intermingle with the community, because that's another thing that I got a lot of response on was people wanted to help. They didn't know how. And quite frankly, early on, I didn't know either. I was just trying to figure it out. So I didn't have an ask at the time. What I do know is that officers don't expect their coffee to be bought, their meals to be paid. They just want to know we're there. And I think, to your point, reflecting back on, that time period of 2021, they didn't know that we were there. And there's lots of reasons for that. And that is no longer acceptable in my eyes. So we will do things. And that's why I was saying the bold is really important in our mission. We will do things that are bold, and we will no longer, stay silent. So it is very much as a a fundraiser, it is a party to celebrate them and to show them with their eyes and their families. It's really important for families to see that my loved one is not fighting alone. We're going to do a visual celebration.
Who are some of the guest speakers you're going to have?
Yeah, so we have Jason Schechterly, who is maybe a little better known in the police circuit, but I know he speaks all over. He's got an amazing story. He was an officer that was rear-ended on his way to a call, and his car caught on fire. And his story of resiliency is amazing. Again, that's a pillar of our mission. So we are intentional about bringing in those speakers who align with what we're trying to do. And we have Dog the Bounty Hunter, who doesn't know Dog. But Dog has another message of, officers, when you think no one's listening, it is getting in, because his story is just that. He was on the wrong side of the law for many years, was sitting in the back of a police car, and it was something that policeman said that he was like, yeah, I got to change something. So he will be speaking. And then we have a comedian, Vinny Montez, who is an officer, and he tells some really funny jokes that, quite frankly, only an officer could tell, because they're pretty pointed, but they're real, and he keeps it real. But he's got the credibility to tell it, because he is one. So we are really excited about this event, our speakers, and we look to have a great support. And if anyone has anything they'd like to donate for the auction, they can contact me. If you're wanting, again, just to show some support and, donate something that we could auction off to raise money for these responders, we invite that.
So where can people find more information about Project Never Broken, about Party with a Purpose, and all the great things you're doing?
So we're on social. We're just on Facebook. That shows my age. That's the only one I can keep up with. And then you can go to projectneverbroken.org and learn about the work we're doing and some of our events we've done in the past and the things that we have planned coming up.
Shelley Klingerman, you are doing amazing work, and we at the National Police Association appreciate everything that you do. And if you'd like more information about us, visit the National Police Association at nationalpolice.org.
Are you passionate about supporting law enforcement? The National Police Association is on a mission to strengthen our communities, protect our families, and ensure justice prevails. But they need your help. Every dollar you donate makes a difference. It funds the legal defense of police officers and police agencies, supports advocacy for pro-law enforcement legislation, and funds community outreach programs and education. Imagine safer streets, stronger bonds between officers and neighborhoods, and a brighter future for all. Join us. Visit our website at nationalpolice.org to donate today.